Nathan Cole's voice cut through the briefing room like a knife through silk. "Look at Harper, sitting there like she's one of us. The mascot thinks she's a pilot." Laughter erupted sharp and cruel as my pen froze above my notebook. I was not supposed to hear that, but I did. My blood turned to ice, then fire, and I gripped the pen until my knuckles whitened. I had a plan, a truth they could not see. One day, they would choke on their words. The room buzzed with their careless energy, slapped backs, inside jokes, the clink of coffee mugs. I sat apart, my regulation bun tight against my scalp, my posture rigid. Hawthorne Air Base smelled of jet fuel and dust, even here, where maps and mission briefs papered the walls. The desert sun bled through the blinds, painting stripes across my hands. I was early, as always, 15 minutes before Commander Thomas Grant would stride in and demand silence. 15 minutes to endure their whispers. Mascot. Decoration, not a real pilot. The words had followed me for months, since Nathan spotted the photo on my desk, me at 8, in a plastic pilot's helmet, grinning like I could conquer the sky. He had laughed then, too, and the name stuck. I forced my eyes to the notebook, tracing the terrain map I had memorized. Devil's Corridor, a canyon so narrow most pilots avoided it. I knew every ridge, every turn, every impossible climb. In the simulator, I had flown it 53 times. My best time beat the base record by 12 seconds. They did not know that. They did not care. To them, I was Emily Harper, the woman who fixed their mistakes, checked their jets, and stayed silent. But silence was my armor. Silence hid the fire. The simulator room was my sanctuary, a concrete box buried in the base's heart. That night, after the briefing, I swiped my access card and slipped inside. The lights flickered on, cold and sterile, illuminating the mock cockpit. It smelled of metal and stale air, a scent that grounded me. I climbed in, my movements precise, and the system hummed to life. The screen glowed, projecting Devil's Corridor's jagged walls. My fingers danced across the controls, muscle memory guiding me through the startup sequence. I was alone here, free from their smirks, their voices, just me and the machine. The simulation began. I banked hard, skimming the canyon's edge, the virtual river flashing below. My heart pounded, not from fear but from focus. I saw my grandmother's face, Eleanor Harper, a WASP pilot, ferrying bombers in World War II. She had faced men like Nathan, men who called her a liability, a girl playing at war. "Keep flying, Emily," she had told me, her voice rough with age, her eyes fierce. "They'll try to ground you. Don't let them." I pushed the stick forward, diving into a turn that would have made most pilots flinch. The simulator's alarms blared, too close, too fast, but I knew the route. I threaded the needle, emerging clean. Mission complete. Time, 16 minutes, 48 seconds. A new personal best. I reset the system and ran it again. My rage from the briefing room fueled me, each maneuver a defiance of Nathan's words. Mascot. The word echoed, but I drowned it out with the roar of virtual engines. My grandfather, a P-51 Mustang pilot, had taught me to channel anger into precision. "The sky doesn't care about your feelings," he had said. "It cares about your skill." I flew until my shoulders ached, until the clock read 23:30. Only then did I shut down, my breath steady, my mind clear. I stepped into the desert night, the stars sharp against the black sky. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked to my quarters, avoiding the officers' club where Nathan and the others drank and boasted. I was ready for whatever came next. I had to be. Dawn broke over Hawthorne, the horizon glowing amber. I stood before the assignment board at 05:59, my flight suit crisp, my pulse steady. Pilots gathered, their voices a low hum, but I kept my distance. Nathan's smirk found me from across the crowd. "Don't bother looking, Harper," he called, his tone dripping venom. "You're on comms again." The others laughed, but I ignored them, my finger tracing the list. There it was. Emily Harper, Ground Control Communications Monitoring. My stomach twisted, but my face remained stone. Another day denied the sky. Commander Grant appeared, his weathered face tight with something unspoken. "Harper, walk with me," he said, leading me away from the board. His boots scuffed the concrete and the desert air burned my lungs. When we were alone, he stopped, his eyes searching mine. "I put your name forward for the air team again," he said. "Colonel Hayes overruled me. Politics." His jaw clenched, and I saw the weight he carried. Years of fighting battles he could not win. "You should be leading this exercise, not monitoring it." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "I understand, sir. My time will come." He studied me, his silence heavy with respect and frustration. "Your patience is extraordinary, Lieutenant. I'm not sure I could manage it." I thought of my grandmother waiting 2 years to fly. "I can wait longer if necessary, sir," I said. He nodded, then glanced at his watch. "Report to Hangar C after the briefing. Jet 4 needs a maintenance check." I saluted, my resolve hardening. If they would not let me fly, I would make their jets perfect. In Hangar C, Jet 4 waited, its metal skin gleaming under fluorescent lights. I climbed the ladder, settling into the cockpit like it was home. The controls fit my hands, familiar and alive. I ran the checklist, my focus absolute, checking systems others overlooked. Halfway through, I found it. A discrepancy in the fuel circulation system, subtle but dangerous. I adjusted it, my hands steady, my mind racing. This was where I belonged, not behind a radio. I glanced at the radar screen, running a diagnostic on the backup systems. A single blip flickered, then steadied, far to the northwest. My pulse quickened. That was not part of the exercise. I reached for the radio, my voice calm but urgent. "Control tower, this is Lieutenant Harper in Hangar C, detecting an anomaly bearing 315 low altitude." "Please confirm." Static answered. I tried again, switching frequencies. "Control tower, come in." Unidentified signature approaching. Respond. Silence. My eyes locked on the screen as the blip grew closer, faster. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The communications room hummed with static, a low drone that burrowed into my skull. I sat at the console, headset clamped over my ears, my eyes fixed on the radar display. That blip from Hangar C lingered in my mind, a ghost that refused to fade. The screen showed 8 friendly jets, the training exercise unfolding as planned, their signatures crawling across the grid. But I could not shake the unease, the prickling at the base of my neck. I adjusted the headset, my fingers brushing the worn leather of my grandmother's dog tags, tucked beneath my flight suit. Her strength steadied me, even now, as I waited in a room that felt like a cage. The room was a concrete box, its walls lined with monitors and tangled cables. The air smelled of burnt coffee and ozone, the faint tang of electronics pushed to their limit. Other technicians moved around me, their voices a dull murmur discussing fuel logs and weather patterns. I was invisible to them, just as I was to the pilots outside, prepping their jets on the tarmac. Nathan Cole's voice crackled through the radio, sharp and smug. "Alpha 1, ready for takeoff." "Let's make this quick." I logged his clearance, my pen scratching the paper with precision. He did not know I was listening. He did not care. To him, I was just the mascot, a name on a roster, a woman who belonged behind a desk, not in a cockpit. I glanced at the clock. 09:15. The exercise was in full swing, jets slicing through the desert sky, chasing simulated targets. My job was to monitor, to relay, to stay silent unless spoken to. But my mind wandered, tracing the canyon routes I had flown in the simulator. Devil's Corridor, with its razor-thin margins and unforgiving walls. I could fly it blind, every turn etched into my bones. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was there, the stick vibrating in my hands, the roar of engines drowning out Nathan's laughter. Then a technician coughed, and the vision shattered. I was back in the chair, grounded, my wings clipped by men who saw me as less. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory, rough as the desert wind. The sky tests you, Emily. Not just your hands, but your heart. I was 10, sitting on his porch, the Arizona sun baking the earth red. He held a model P-51 Mustang, its paint chipped from years of handling. I flew through hell in 44, he said, his eyes distant. Lost friends? Lost hope some days. But I kept flying, because that's what we do. He handed me the model, his calloused fingers brushing mine. You'll face your own hell. Don't let it break you. I clutched that plane for years, even after he was gone, its weight a promise. I would not break. Not then, not now. In the communications room, I opened my notebook, flipping to a page of handwritten notes, attack vectors, fuel calculations, terrain data. I had studied the training area for months, mapping routes no one else bothered with. The other pilots relied on instinct, on bravado. I relied on knowledge, on the certainty that preparation would outlast their scorn. My pen traced a line through Devil's Corridor, a path that shaved seconds off the approach. It required a vertical climb, a maneuver most called suicidal. I had done it 53 times in simulation. Perfectly. Every time. I snapped the notebook shut, my jaw tight. If they would not give me the sky, I would take it. A burst of static snapped me back. Control, this is Alpha 2. Lieutenant James Tucker's voice, clipped and impatient. Confirm heading for target 3. I leaned into the mic, my tone steady. Alpha 2 heading 275, altitude 10,000 feet. Target 3 confirmed. He did not acknowledge me, just clicked off. I logged the exchange, my handwriting sharp, each letter a small act of defiance. They could ignore me, but they could not erase me. Not yet. Chatter. Hangar C was quiet when I arrived at 10:30, the maintenance check on Jet 4 calling me back to the cockpit. The desert sun glared through the open doors, heat waves shimmering on the tarmac. The jet loomed before me, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts. I climbed the ladder, my boots ringing on the metal rungs, and settled into the seat. The cockpit smelled of oil and leather, a scent that felt like home. I ran my hands over the controls, a ritual that calmed the storm inside me. This was where I belonged, where the world made sense. The maintenance chief, a grizzled man named Harris, nodded from below. All yours, Lieutenant. Full check. No rush. His voice carried respect, a rare gift on this base. I nodded back, already focused on the checklist. I tested the avionics, the hydraulics, the fuel systems, my movements methodical. Halfway through, I found it again. That same fuel circulation flaw from earlier, a hairline crack in the regulator. It was subtle, the kind of thing most pilots would miss. I adjusted it, my tools steady, my mind sharp. This jet would fly perfectly, even if I was not the one to fly it. I glanced at the radar screen, running a final diagnostic. The training exercise signatures blinked steadily, 8 jets weaving through the range. But there, in the northwest corner, that blip reappeared. 3 signatures, low and fast, no transponders. My breath caught. This was not part of the exercise. I grabbed the radio, my voice urgent but controlled. Control Tower, this is Lieutenant Harper in Hangar C. 3 unidentified aircraft bearing 3 on 15 low altitude. Confirm immediately. Static hissed back, a dead silence that chilled me. I switched frequencies, tried again. Control Tower, respond. Unidentified aircraft approaching. Vector and intent unknown. Nothing. My eyes flicked to the screen. The signatures were closer now, their speed unnatural, their path a straight line toward Hawthorne. I scanned the hangar through the cockpit window. Ground crew moved equipment, mechanics hunched over engines, administrative staff crossed the tarmac with clipboards. Everything looked normal, but it felt wrong. My pulse hammered, a warning I could not ignore. I keyed the radio one last time, my voice sharp. Control Tower, this is Harper. 3 hostiles incoming, northwest vector. Respond now. The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed my words. Outside, a black dot appeared on the horizon, growing larger, faster, too fast. My hands tightened on the controls, my training screaming one truth. Whatever was coming, it was not a drill, and no one else was ready. The explosion tore through the morning, a blinding flash that swallowed the communications tower in flames. The shockwave slammed into Jet 4, rocking the cockpit like a boat in a storm. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing across the console. My hands froze on the controls, my breath caught in my throat. Through the canopy, I saw debris raining down, black smoke curling into the desert sky. The base was under attack. My mind raced, piecing together the truth. Those radar blips, the silent radio, the black dot on the horizon. They were here, and I was the only one who saw them coming. I scanned the chaos below. Ground crews scattered, some diving for cover, others dragging wounded toward shelters. A second explosion erupted, the main hangar collapsing in a fireball of twisted metal and jet fuel. My heart pounded, but my training took over, sharp and instinctive. The radar flickered, showing 4 hostile signatures now, banking for another strike. The base's anti-aircraft batteries should have roared to life, but they sat silent, their systems likely sabotaged. I keyed the radio, my voice steady despite the fear clawing my chest. All personnel, this is Lieutenant Harper in Hangar C. We are under attack. Hostile aircraft, northwest vector. Defensive grid offline. Static answered, but I kept broadcasting, hoping someone would hear. Emergency protocols now. This is not a drill. The cockpit felt alive beneath me, Jet 4's systems humming, fueled and ready for my maintenance check. The auxiliary strip outside Hangar C stretched clear, a narrow ribbon of concrete untouched by the strikes. No one had targeted it. Why would they? It was not part of the active fleet. The irony hit me like a punch. The only flyable jet on base was in the hands of the pilot they never let fly. I started the ignition sequence, my fingers moving with practiced precision. The engines whined, then roared, vibrating through my bones. I was not supposed to do this. Commander Grant's orders echoed in my mind. Report to communications, stay grounded. But the base was burning, and the sky was empty. I had no choice. A figure sprinted across the tarmac, dodging debris, his uniform streaked with soot. Commander Thomas Grant. His face was grim, a cut above his eye dripping blood. He waved something in his hand, a scrap of paper. I popped the canopy, the desert heat rushing in, thick with the acrid stench of smoke. "Harper!" he shouted, his voice raw over the chaos. "Hold position! That's an order!" My finger hovered over the throttle, my resolve wavering. Disobeying a direct command was unthinkable, a line I had never crossed. But another missile streaked overhead, slamming into the fuel depot with a deafening roar. The ground shook and Grant stumbled, catching himself against the jet's ladder. He climbed up, his eyes locking onto mine, fierce and unyielding. "4 Su-57s, stealth configuration," he said. thrusting the paper into my hands. It was a hand-drawn map, scrawled with coordinates and a radio frequency. Defensive grid's gone. Radar's compromised. This is the last working channel. He pointed to a number in the corner, his hand trembling slightly. I stared at him, my mind reeling. He was not ordering me out. He was arming me to fight. "Sir," I said, my voice barely audible over the alarms. His jaw tightened, blood mixing with sweat on his cheek. "You're all we've got, Harper. Show them what you can do." He stepped back, snapping a salute, a gesture so raw, so final it stole my breath. I returned it, my hand steady, then sealed the canopy. The weight of his trust settled over me, heavy as the jet itself. I advanced the throttle, signaling the ground crew to remove the wheel blocks. A young technician, wide-eyed and shaking, hesitated, then followed my gestures, yanking the blocks free. The jet lurched forward, taxiing toward the auxiliary strip. My radio crackled, Nathan Cole's voice cutting through, laced with panic. "Control! This is Alpha 1! What the hell's happening down there?" A frantic voice from the backup comm station responded. "Base under attack! Main runway destroyed! Defense systems offline! Do not attempt landing!" Nathan's reply was sharp, his usual swagger gone. "We're low on fuel. We need options now." I keyed my mic, my voice calm, cutting through their chaos. "Captain Cole, this is Lieutenant Harper. I'm preparing takeoff from the auxiliary strip to engage hostiles. Divert your squadron to Holloman Air Force Base, bearing 157, distance 112 miles. You have fuel if you maintain cruise altitude." Silence followed, stunned and heavy. Then Nathan's voice, tight with disbelief. "Harper, what are you doing in a jet?" I ignored him, running final checks. Another explosion rocked the base, closer now, flames licking the edge of Hangar C. I saw personnel scrambling, some wounded, others frozen in shock. The auxiliary strip was my only path, a fragile lifeline through the smoke. "Dapitike." "Lieutenant Harper, hold position!" Grant's voice burst through the emergency channel, distorted but firm. "That's an order!" My hand tightened on the stick, my pulse hammering. For the first time, I considered defying him outright. The base was crumbling, its defenses gutted, its pilots stranded in the sky. I was the only one left, the only one ready. I pushed the throttle forward, the jet surging down the strip. "All Hawthorne personnel, this is Lieutenant Harper," I said into the radio, my voice steady as stone. "I am airborne in 60 seconds to engage hostiles. We'll establish perimeter defense until reinforcements arrive." The jet accelerated, the vibrations rattling my teeth. Smoke choked the air, obscuring the runway's end. I saw base personnel pause, turning to watch, some pointing, others staring in disbelief. The wheels screamed against the concrete, the speed pressing me back into the seat. At rotation speed, I eased the stick and the nose lifted clean and sure. The ground fell away and I was airborne, climbing through the haze. My heart thundered, not with fear, but with purpose. I banked northwest, the radar locking onto 4 enemy signatures, regrouping for another strike. A missile streaked past, too close, its trail a white scar against the sky. It struck the officers' quarters, the fireball swallowing the building whole. I forced my eyes forward, my hands steady on the controls. The enemy jets were ahead, their stealth outlines barely visible against the desert's glare. "Base, this is Harper," I radioed, my voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. "Visual on 4 hostiles, Su-57 configuration, engaging now to divert from base perimeter." No one answered. I was alone, the sky my battlefield, the weight of Hawthorne on my wings. Another missile launched, its arc aimed straight for the heart of the base. I pushed the throttle to full, my jet screaming toward the enemy, knowing I might not make it in time. The enemy jets split apart, their sleek forms scattering like shadows across the desert sky. My radar tracked 4 Su-57s, their stealth signatures flickering as they maneuvered to encircle me. I pushed Jet 4 into a steep climb, the engines roaring, the G-forces pinning me to the seat. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of adrenaline and focus. I had one advantage: Devil's Corridor. The canyon I knew better than my own heartbeat. I banked hard, diving toward its jagged mouth, baiting them to follow. The base burned behind me, smoke rising in thick columns, but I could not look back. My job was to keep those jets away from Hawthorne, no matter the cost. The canyon loomed ahead, its walls rising sharp and unforgiving, the river below a silver thread in the morning light. I dropped low, skimming 50 feet above the water, the jet's vibrations rattling my teeth. My hands were steady, but my mind raced, replaying every simulator run, every turn I had mastered alone. The enemy pilots took the bait, 2 diving into the canyon behind me, their signatures glowing on my radar. The other 2 climbed, circling above, waiting for me to emerge. They thought they had me trapped. They were wrong. I knew this terrain, every ridge, every outcrop, every deadly curve. I had flown it 53 times in simulation, and I would fly it now. My first missile lock failed, the lead Su-57 jinking left, its pilot skilled and ruthless. These were not amateurs. I gritted my teeth, adjusting my angle, the canyon walls blurring past. A memory flashed. Nights in the simulator room, the hum of the machine my only company, while Nathan Cole and the others laughed in the officers' club. I had run this exact scenario, pushing the jet's limits, perfecting the impossible. "You're wasting your time, Harper," Nathan had said once, his smirk cutting deeper than his words. I shoved the memory aside, my focus absolute. The canyon narrowed, and I banked hard, the jet's wingtip inches from stone. Behind me, one enemy pilot misjudged a turn. His jet clipped the wall, erupting in a fireball that lit the canyon red. 3 left. Chapter 8. The simulator's glow had been my refuge, its cold light a shield against the base's cruelty. I remembered one night months ago, my hands trembling with exhaustion as I reset the system for the 10th run. My grandmother's voice had echoed in my mind, fierce and unyielding. "They'll tell you you're not enough, Emily," she had said, her flight suit creased with age, her eyes blazing. "Prove them wrong, every damn day." I had flown Devil's Corridor that night, until my vision blurred, until the vertical climb felt like breathing. I had crashed twice, then 3 times, then never again. By dawn, I had shaved 12 seconds off the base record. No one knew. No one cared, but I knew, and now that knowledge was my weapon. In the canyon, I pushed the jet harder, the walls closing in, the river a shimmering blur below. The second enemy pilot was relentless, matching my turns, his jet a dark specter in my rearview. I glanced at the radar, 2 Su-57s still above, waiting to pounce. My jet shuddered, a warning light flashing, hydraulic pressure dropping. A stray round must have grazed me, a wound I had not felt in the chaos. I silenced the alarm, my mind racing. I could not fight 3 at once, not with a damaged jet. I needed to change the game. I approached the canyon's end, the exit a narrow gap framed by towering cliffs. My fingers tightened on the stick, my breath steady. This was it, the vertical climb I had perfected in simulation, the maneuver Nathan called suicidal. I pulled back, the jet screaming upward, the G-forces crushing my chest. The canyon wall loomed, a sheer face of stone, but I held the climb, my timing precise. The pursuing Su-57 shot past below, expecting me to fly straight. I crested the ridge, inverted the jet, and dove, my missile lock beeping steady. I fired. The enemy jet exploded, debris scattering across the desert floor. 2 left. Chapter all. The remaining Su-57s converged, their missiles locking onto me with mechanical precision. My threat warning system screamed. a shrill pulse that matched my racing heart. I deployed countermeasures, chaff and flares bursting behind me, but the jet shuddered again, the hydraulic warning now a constant red glare. The left wing was compromised, the stick fighting my grip. I dove back into the canyon, the walls a blur, my only shield against the missiles streaking toward me. Tracer rounds zipped past, one grazing the canopy with a sickening screech. My breath hitched, but I forced it even, my grandmother's dog tags pressing against my chest like a talisman. I led the enemy pilots deeper, their jets dogging my tail, their confidence growing. They thought they had me, outnumbered, outgunned, my jet bleeding hydraulic fluid. But I had the canyon, and I had my mind. I remembered every simulator run, every failure, every correction. I had studied this terrain until it was part of me, until I could fly it with my eyes closed. The enemy pilots were skilled, but they were strangers here. I was not. A sharp turn loomed, a bottleneck where the canyon narrowed to 30 meters. I banked hard, the jet groaning, the damaged wing sluggish. The lead Su-57 followed, too close, his guns blazing. I cut power for a split second, a reckless move that slowed me just enough. He overshot, his jet flashing past, exposed. I locked on, my last air-to-air missile ready. I fired, and the canyon lit up, the enemy jet spiraling into the river below in a cascade of flame. One left. The final Su-57 climbed, breaking off to regroup, its pilot wary now. My jet was faltering, warning lights multiplying, the stick heavy in my hands. I glanced at the radar, my breath shallow. The enemy was circling, waiting for me to climb, to expose myself. I had no missiles left, only guns, and a jet that might not survive another climb. The canyon stretched ahead, its walls a labyrinth of stone and shadow. I knew what I had to do, a maneuver so dangerous it had never been attempted in combat. The stone arch, a natural bridge spanning the canyon, was my only chance. I pushed the throttle, my voice a whisper in the cockpit. "This is for you, Grandma." A missile lock beeped, the last Su-57 closing fast. I flew straight for the arch, my fate hanging on a razor's edge. The stone arch loomed ahead, a jagged scar across the canyon's throat, its shadow swallowing the river below. My jet screamed toward it, the last Su-57's missile lock a relentless beep in my ears. The cockpit was a chaos of red warnings, hydraulic failure, wing damage, low fuel. My hands gripped the stick, slick with sweat, but my mind was clear, every second measured. I had one shot, one impossible maneuver to end this. The arch was narrow, barely wider than my jet's wings. I had flown it in simulation, threading the needle with a precision that left no room for error. Now, with a dying jet and an enemy on my tail, I had to do it for real. My grandmother's dog tags burned against my chest. "Prove them wrong," she had said. I would. I pushed the throttle to its limit, the engines howling, the canyon walls blurring into streaks of ochre and gray. The Su-57 was close, its pilot emboldened by my damaged jet, his guns spitting tracer rounds that streaked past my canopy. One grazed the tail, a jolt that shook the frame, but I held course, my eyes locked on the arch. The missile lock grew louder, a scream that drowned out the alarms. I counted the seconds, my breath steady, my heart a metronome. 3, 2, 1. I rolled the jet 90 degrees, wings vertical, and slipped sideways through the arch. The stone flashed inches from my canopy, a heartbeat from disaster. Behind me, the Su-57, too fast to adjust, slammed into the rock. The explosion roared, debris raining into the canyon, the shockwave rattling my wounded jet. I leveled out, my chest heaving, the radar clear. The enemy was gone. The silence was deafening, broken only by the jet's labored hum. I ran diagnostics, my hands trembling now that the fight was over. The left wing was barely responsive, hydraulic fluid nearly gone. Fuel was critical, the gauge flashing red. I could still fly, but landing would be a gamble. My mind flickered to the simulator, to the nights I had pushed past exhaustion, perfecting every scenario. I had crashed in that virtual canyon, learned from each failure until the sky bent to my will. But this was no simulation. Hawthorne was burning, its people counting on me to return. I thought of Commander Grant's salute, his blood-streaked face, his words, "Show them what you can do." I had shown them. Now I had to make it home. A memory surfaced, sharp and vivid. My grandmother, Eleanor, sitting by her kitchen window, her flight log open before her. I was 16. My hands stained with engine grease from helping her restore a vintage Cessna. "The sky doesn't forgive mistakes," she had said, her voice soft but steel-edged. "But it rewards courage. When the moment comes, Emily, you'll know what to do." Her eyes had held mine, fierce with belief, and I had felt it, a spark that burned through doubt. Now, in the cockpit, that spark flared. I adjusted the controls, compensating for the damage, my grandmother's courage steadying my hands. I was not done yet. The canyon fell away, the desert stretching wide and merciless below. I climbed slowly, the jet protesting every foot of altitude. My radio crackled, faint voices breaking through the static. "Lieutenant Harper, this is emergency comms," a technician said, his voice tight with urgency. "Report status. Hostiles neutralized?" I keyed the mic, my voice calm despite the ache in my bones. "Base, this is Harper. All hostiles neutralized. 4 Su-57s down. Aircraft damaged but operational. Request emergency landing clearance." Cheers erupted over the channel, a wave of relief that felt distant, unreal. Commander Grant's voice cut through, steady and professional. "Lieutenant, we've cleared debris from the emergency strip. Your priority landing. Emergency crews on standby." Bottom. The base came into view, a scarred battlefield under a cloudless sky. Smoke rose from the ruins of the communications tower, the hangar, the officers' quarters. The main runway was a cratered ruin, but the emergency strip gleamed, hastily cleared by hands I could not see. My jet shuddered, the stick fighting me, the left wing sluggish. Red lights flashed, warning of imminent hydraulic failure. I silenced them, my focus absolute. The desert wind howled, a crosswind that would make landing brutal. I calculated the approach, adjusting for drift, my mind tracing the strip's narrow path. Figures lined both sides, base personnel, their faces blurred by distance, watching, waiting. I wondered if Nathan Cole was among them, his smirk erased by the truth of what I had done. My grandmother's voice echoed again, a whisper from that kitchen long ago. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Emily. It's flying through it." I was afraid, not of dying, but of failing them, of proving the Mascot label true. I shoved the fear down, locking it away with Nathan's laughter, with every slight I had endured. The strip rushed closer, the jet trembling, its systems on the edge of collapse. I flared the nose, my hands wrestling the stick, compensating for the sluggish controls. The wheels touched down, a jolt that rattled my spine, but I held the center line, the jet slowing, groaning, alive. I taxied to a stop, the engines winding down, the cockpit suddenly still. I sat for a moment, hands gripping the controls, my breath deep and deliberate. The canopy popped open, and the desert heat rushed in, thick with smoke and fuel. Emergency crews swarmed, their shouts distant, their hands guiding me down the ladder. My legs shook, the adrenaline crash hitting hard, but I stood tall, my flight suit streaked with sweat. The crowd parted, and Commander Grant stepped forward, his face grim, his eyes bright with something new. Pride. "Lieutenant Harper," he said, his voice carrying over the silence. "That was the finest flying I've ever seen." My throat tightened, but before I could respond, a shadow moved in the crowd. Nathan Cole, his face pale, his eyes wide. He saluted, sharp and sincere, a gesture that stopped my heart. The others followed, a line of pilots, their hands raised in respect. I returned the salute, my hand steady, but inside, a storm was breaking. I had won. But at what cost? The desert air stung my lungs, heavy with the reek of charred metal and jet fuel. I stood on the tarmac, my legs unsteady, the weight of the battle settling into my bones. Around me, Hawthorne Air Base lay in ruins. Smoke coiled from the wreckage of the communications tower, the hangar a skeleton of twisted steel. Emergency crews moved through the chaos, their shouts sharp against the crackle of dying fires. The crowd of personnel watched me, their faces a blur of awe and disbelief. I was no longer the mascot, the decoration. I was Lieutenant Emily Harper, the pilot who saved them. But the victory felt hollow, my chest tight with the cost of it all. Commander Thomas Grant's hand gripped mine, his palm rough, his eyes fierce with gratitude. "You saved us, Harper," he said, his voice low, meant for me alone. "Every soul on this base owes you their life." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. His uniform was torn, blood crusted above his eye, but his posture was unyielding, a soldier who had seen too much, yet stood taller for it. Behind him, Nathan Cole stepped forward, his usual swagger gone, his face pale under the desert sun. He snapped a salute, his hand trembling slightly, the first honest gesture he had ever offered me. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd, "I owe you my life. We all do." One by one, the other pilots followed, James Tucker, the maintenance chief, even the administrative staff, forming a line of raised hands, their salutes a mirror of my own. I returned each one, my arm steady, my heart racing. This was what I had fought for, but it felt like a dream, fragile and fleeting. I scanned the crowd, searching for the wounded, the missing. 6 personnel injured, Grant had said. No fatalities. My early warning had given them time to reach shelters, but the base was crippled, its defenses gutted. I thought of the Su-57s, their stealth and precision, a strike too calculated for a random assault. Who were they? The question burned, but exhaustion dulled my edges, my body begging for rest. Grant noticed, his gaze softening. "Medical tent, Harper," he said, nodding toward a canvas structure nearby. "Then debrief. The Pentagon's already breathing down our necks." I nodded, letting a medic guide me through the crowd, their eyes following me like I was something new, something real. The medical tent smelled of antiseptic and sweat, its canvas walls trembling in the desert wind. A doctor, her face lined with fatigue, checked me over, her hands quick but gentle. "Minor bruising," she said, scribbling on a clipboard. "You're lucky, Lieutenant." That jet took a beating. I nodded, my mind elsewhere, replaying the canyon, the arch, the fireball that ended it all. She prescribed rest, but I knew that was impossible. Too much remained undone. The debriefing room was a makeshift setup in a storage shed, its walls bare, its air thick with dust. Intelligence officers waited, their faces grim, recorders humming. I sat at a folding table, my flight suit still damp with sweat, and began. I described the Su-57s with clinical precision, their formations, their weapons, their tactics. I drew diagrams on a notepad, my pen tracing the canyon's curves, the arch's narrow span. "They targeted the defensive grid first," I said, my voice steady. "Communications, radar, anti-aircraft batteries, all offline before the first missile hit." The officers leaned forward, their questions sharp, technical. How fast were the enemy jets? What was their missile range? I answered from memory. My simulator hours a library of data no one else had bothered to learn. Colonel Robert Hayes, the man who had blocked my flight assignments, listened in silence, his expression unreadable. I met his gaze, unflinching, my words a quiet challenge. I had done what he thought impossible. When the question slowed, Hayes leaned forward, his voice measured. Lieutenant Harper, those maneuvers, vertical climbs, the arch gambit, most pilots wouldn't survive them. Where did you learn to fly like that? The room stilled, the officer's pens pausing. I held his stare, my answer simple. The simulator, sir. Over 2,000 hours of personal practice. A murmur rippled through the room, disbelief and respect intertwined. Hayes blinked, his composure slipping. 2,000 hours, he repeated, as if the number was a foreign language. Yes, sir, I said, offering no more. I did not tell him about the nights alone, the weekends sacrificed, the mockery I swallowed to keep going. The results spoke louder than words. Hayes exchanged a glance with Grant, something unspoken passing between them. Lieutenant, Hayes said, his tone softer now, I owe you an apology, and a correction to your assignments. My chest tightened, a weight lifting after months of carrying it. I nodded, my face neutral, but inside a spark flared, vindication, sharp and bright. The debrief ended, and Grant pulled me aside as the officers filed out. You've changed things, Harper, he said, his voice low. Not just for you, but for every pilot who comes after. I thought of Rachel Kim, the new lieutenant, her nervous posture a mirror of my own months ago. I would find her, guide her, ensure she never faced what I had. Outside, the base was a hive of activity, crews clearing rubble, medics tending the wounded. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and blood. I walked toward the temporary barracks, my steps slow, my body aching. Nathan Cole stood near a wrecked jeep, his face drawn, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He saw me and straightened, his hands fidgeting, searching for words. Harper, he said, his voice rough. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I studied him. The man who had called me Mascot, who had laughed while I bled inside. Part of me wanted to lash out, to make him feel the weight of his words. But I saw the shame in his eyes, the crack in his armor, and I let it go. You followed orders, I said, my voice even. Now follow mine. Be better. He nodded, his jaw tight, and I walked away, the desert wind cool against my skin. The barracks were sparse, my bunk a narrow slab, my desk bare except for a framed photo, my grandmother in her WASP flight suit, her hand on a B-17's propeller. I touched the frame, her strength anchoring me. I had honored her today, and my grandfather, their courage woven into every maneuver. But the war was not over. The enemy's motives were unclear, their retreat a question mark. Intelligence suggested a paramilitary group, well-funded, aiming to cripple the base's operations. More would come, and I had to be ready. I sat on the bunk, my journal open, my pen poised. Day 275, I wrote, my handwriting sharp. I flew, I fought. I won. I paused, then added, but it's not enough. Not yet. I closed the journal, my eyes on the photo, my resolve unbroken. Colonel Hayes's words echoed, new assignments, a correction. I sensed a shift, a door opening, but the path beyond was shadowed, fraught with new battles. A knock at the door startled me. A young lieutenant stood there, her face nervous, her posture rigid. Rachel Kim. Captain Cole said you wanted to see me, ma'am, she said, her voice small. I stood, a smile breaking through my fatigue. The future was here, and it was mine to shape. But what would it cost? The desert sun blazed over Hawthorne Air Base, its heat a relentless pulse against the tarmac. I stood in the temporary briefing room, a converted storage shed, my new captain's bars heavy on my shoulders. The air smelled of fresh paint and concrete dust, the base rebuilding itself from the ashes. My pilots sat before me, their faces attentive, their notebooks open. No smirks, no whispers, only respect, a silence that carried weight. 7 days ago, I was the Mascot, the outcast. Now, I was Captain Emily Harper, leader of the Phoenix Squadron, a unit forged for high-risk missions. My chest tightened with pride, but beneath it, a quiet fear lingered. Leadership was a new sky, uncharted and vast. I unfolded a topographical map, spreading it across the table. Canyon Route 7, I said, my voice clear, steady. The most challenging terrain on the range. Narrow passages, vertical transitions, limited maneuverability. My finger traced the path, Devil's Corridor, the canyon where I had fought and won. The pilots leaned forward, their eyes sharp. Nathan Cole, James Tucker, and the others who had once mocked me, now my team. At the roster's bottom was a new name, Lieutenant Rachel Kim, the only other woman on base, her presence a mirror of my past. I met her gaze, brief but firm, a promise to guide her where I had stumbled alone. Nathan raised a hand, his brow furrowed. "Permission to speak, Captain?" I nodded, bracing for the challenge. "This route's never been cleared for training," he said, studying the map. The canyon narrows to less than 50 meters in 3 places. His tone held no mockery, only caution, a soldier learning to trust. I held his gaze, my voice even. "I'm aware, Captain Cole. I've flown it 67 times in simulation and once in combat. Today you'll learn how." Understanding dawned in their expressions, the realization that my preparation, once dismissed as obsession, had saved them. They straightened, pens scratching, ready to follow where I led. Chapter. The briefing ended, and I walked to the hangar, Rachel Kim at my side. Her steps were hesitant, her posture guarded, a reflection of my own months ago. The desert wind whipped across the tarmac, carrying the hum of construction crews and the roar of new jets, their paint gleaming under the sun. "Lieutenant Kim," I said, my tone firm but warm, "what's your simulator experience?" She glanced at me, her eyes nervous but eager. 300 hours, Captain. Mostly standard combat scenarios. I nodded, stopping to face her. "Starting tonight, you'll access my training programs. They're demanding, but you'll master them." Relief flashed across her face, and she straightened. "I'll put in the hours, Captain." I studied her, seeing the spark I had once carried, the hunger to prove herself. "The most important thing," I said, my voice low, "is this. Never let anyone define your capabilities. Not your instructors, not your peers, not even me." I gestured to the rebuilt base, its scars still visible. "When the moment comes, only you know what you can do." She nodded, her jaw tight, her eyes bright with determination. "Yes, Captain." We continued to the flight line where my jet waited, its new Phoenix emblem catching the light, a bird rising from flames, wings spread against the desert sky. The maintenance crew had painted Mascot Squadron beneath it, a reclamation of the name that once cut me. I smiled, a quiet victory. The squadron gathered on the tarmac, their flight suits crisp, their focus absolute. I spread the map across a Jeep's hood, outlining the day's mission. "Canyon Route 7 tests precision and nerve," I said, my voice carrying over the wind. "You'll fly in pairs, following my lead. Expect tight turns and rapid altitude shifts." The pilots nodded, their questions sharp, their trust in me unspoken but palpable. Nathan studied the map, his usual confidence tempered by respect. "Any margin for error, Captain?" he asked. I met his gaze, unflinching. "None. That's why we train." We climbed into our jets, the cockpit enveloping me like a second skin. I ran my hands over the controls, the familiar ritual calming my pulse. The Phoenix emblem gleamed outside, a symbol of what we could become. I keyed the radio, my voice steady. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Phoenix 1. Line up for takeoff." One by one, the jets rolled into position, their engines a low growl. Rachel's jet was last, her movements precise but cautious. I remembered my first combat flight, the weight of doubt, the thrill of proving it wrong. She would find that, too. The tower cleared us, and I pushed the throttle, the jet surging down the runway. The wheels lifted, the desert falling away, the sky opening wide. My squadron followed, their formations tight, their trust in me a lifeline. We banked toward Devil's Corridor, the canyon's walls rising like sentinels. I led them through the first turn, my jet skimming the river, the walls inches away. "Stay sharp," I radioed. "Follow my line." Nathan's voice came through, steady. "Copy, Phoenix 1. Rachel's was quieter but firm. "Copy." The canyon tested them, its twists unforgiving, but they held formation, their skills honed by my lead. I glanced at the radar, clear of threats, but my mind lingered on the enemy's retreat. Intelligence had confirmed a paramilitary group, their motives tied to regional destabilization, their resources vast. More would come, and Phoenix Squadron had to be ready. We emerged from the canyon, climbing into the open sky, the sun a fierce glow above. "Well done," I radioed, my voice warm with pride. Return to base. Back on the tarmac, the squadron gathered, their faces flushed with exertion and triumph. I dismissed them, but Rachel lingered, her notebook clutched tight. "Captain," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you for seeing me." I nodded, a lump in my throat. "You're Phoenix now, Kim." "We rise together." She smiled, a spark igniting, and walked away, her steps surer. I turned to my jet, the Phoenix emblem catching the fading light. My journal waited in my quarters, and tonight I would write, "Day 282 I lead. I teach. I am enough." The desert stretched beyond, its horizon shimmering with heat. I thought of my grandmother, her flight log, her unyielding courage. I had honored her, but my work was not done. The sky held new battles, new tests, and I would face them with the same fire that carried me through the canyon. My squadron waited, their faith in me a strength I had never known. I saluted the jet, a silent vow, and walked toward the barracks, the Phoenix rising in my heart. But in the distance, a faint rumble echoed, a shadow on the edge of the sky. Something was coming, and I had to be ready.